Well, welcome to Dan and Julie's Worm Life at TLC Edible Garden and Nursery. Today we're just going to go in and watch how we are all naturally raising all our plants and vegetables. Well, how can we raise them naturally? Without a good, healthy, balanced food. And we have found through many trials and errors that just throwing manure on something doesn't quite cut the bucket on this. So we have incorporated our worms. These worms that we are using are the African night crawlers. You won't be taking these fishing very often. We will see how small they are, but they are our little workhorses. This right here is one of the easiest ways to start a very efficient worm bed. This is just simply a metal enamel coated bathtub with the lid hinged to the back side of it, just a wooden lid that is sealed all the way around to keep pests in. Early on, I didn't have it sealed, I just had a lid on it, but air, so air could get through. I found out quickly that the rats love worms, and they were eating up all the worms. It was a magnet for rats, so we closed them off, and that sealed up the problem. The tub is elevated so it doesn't get too hot or too cold. This seems to work pretty well. Even in the winter, it has not been a problem. The drain of the tub, there is a bucket, and you can see there's not a lot of juice, but this is the worm juice that is left over, and we add this to our biochar, but that is a whole nother story. But here's some worm juice. This is a very new bed we just restarted, and that is set right underneath the drain of the tub, which has a wire screen on it to keep the worms and other pests in or out. This is an active bed that I have just taken all the finished stuff and I moved it over. I have found that if I keep the fresh stuff underneath the drain and put the dry stuff to the other side, it dries out better. If it is too wet, if it gets too wet, it just clumps up. So basically, I will break this up. These work really well. I will break this up, spread it out, and keep it open. By keeping it open, it keeps the worms going down. As the worms are going down, pause. As the worms are going down, I left my thing out there. Can you pause it? So then, this dustpan just seems to work the perfect thing. I take it, I scrape it up. I don't get too concerned if there's a few worms, but by the time it dries out a little bit, the worms are going down. I leave it open. I'll leave it open all day if I'm harvesting. And I will harvest it. Put it in the storage container. You want to keep it relatively dry, but not all the moisture. I try to keep the moisture to keep all the bacteria, but if it gets too wet, it just clumps up and you can't use it. So I just take off the top that is dry. As soon as I start seeing a lot of worms, or it's not dry, it's clumped up. See, now it's not clumped up, I have to dig. I'm going to just not harvest anymore. I'm going to dig it up and let it dry out before I harvest anymore. Now underneath here, I have already added, you see this container. This is out of an old refrigerator drawer. Back when they made things out of metal. Underneath of this, I have rabbit manure, goat manure, lettuce, coffee grinds, and a base of horse manure. This is the substance of what we are making, created the black stuff on the left. This is what it will become. I have just done all this, and the worms are working from the left over to the right. This is still rather dry because it hasn't had a lot of activity in it, but as you can see, there are worms in here. They're coming over from the other stuff. And just so you can see the size of this is a full-grown worm. This is all that it is, and you can see this is not a worm that you can take fishing. This is an adult African nightcrawler. You can also identify them by their tail, which is not round, it has a flat edge to it. The red worm and all the other regular wigglers that you see are round on the end. This has an actual flat tail to it, so I can distinguish it, but this is as big as it gets. They can eat 3 to 5 times their body weight a day. So they are pretty well consumers, and these are pretty strong bins. As soon as the worms get from this side all over to this side, this will be able to be added to every other day, and they will consume it all. Because what you saw in there was lettuce. We get rotted lettuce from one of the local food banks. And they can't do anything else with it, but the worms love it. And the beauty of the lettuce, it puts the moisture, and the moisture from the lettuce is enough. I do not add water. It's just from the rotted lettuce and other materials we put in there. Here is some of the rotted lettuce. The next bucket is a mixture of goat manure and rabbit manure. These 2 buckets are the horse manure. And the last bucket is a bucket full of coffee grind and filters, which we don't take out. The worms eat them. You can also add paper or composted sawdust is another good additive. At times, if I have shredded paper, I will use it. But I have found with the horse manure, it's not really necessity because I have all the ground up hay in the horse manure for biomass. This horse manure has not been treated for anything. This is the neighbor's horse, and they don't put any chemicals or anything, and if they do worm them, they do not save the horse manure for me for a few weeks. I have never had any issue with using the horse manure like that. So as you can see in here, we have a couple of these. Well, we have a large nursery, and I was not able to produce. So on this other side, being I was blessed with this shed that someone was going to throw away, my next door neighbor. So I was able to get it and haul it over here. And it is big enough to give us enough room for this and keep the weather off of them, and also help protect them from the cold and elements. So this is a big bin, basically one gigantic bathtub. And I just finished harvesting everything out of this side. Just has a rubber liner. It's actually a shower liner. And at the very end, it can drain off to the very end. So again, I have found it's better to keep my active bunch toward the end with the drain in order to catch the fluid, and the drier stuff to the other side, because if it's too wet, you just cannot work at it. You see these tubs in here. You might say, what is their tubs? It's already shut up. The worms seem to work 3 to 5 times faster than if I just put the stuff in the tub and did not cover it up. I'm no scientist, but it seems to form a very good area underneath the container, and they consume so much more when this container is here. And you'll see just in the top of this is just solid worms. This is pretty close to being done. We are going to be just using this as done stuff for today's this demonstration. And I'm going to take all this and just put it toward the right hand side and allow it to start draining. Most all the food has been consumed. Brush the worms back in. And I'm going to take these pans out. I've tried it both ways. This is 3 to 5 times faster with a good covering. This is an old stainless steel sink just set down on top of this. This is still pretty fresh, but the worms are all right in this area. So this still needs a little bit longer. And this is completely done underneath here. It's funny, sometimes it can just be the amount of food underneath an area, but you can feel on the inside of this, you can see how wet it is. So this area creates a more wetter humidity, and the worms seem to really thrive in this. But if you get it too wet in the whole box, then you just end up with a big clumped up gooey mess. And it's very difficult to use it as a fertilizer. You want to be able to distribute it to your plants. Mix it with I mix mine with my potting soil. And all our plants are used. This is one of the major foods of our plants. So I cannot do that if it's all clumping together. I need to be able to mix it, so it has to be in the drier stage like I showed you over there. This is too wet yet to use. I just knocked off a whole bunch of worms. So what I'm going to do real quick is just show you. Just the other day I just started a little bunch over here because I had worms all over there and I figured it wouldn't hurt. So basically this is a fresh bed I'm starting, but I have a lot of worms over here. And the worms already have made their way. This is fresh, but there's already a good number of worms in here. The lettuce I had put in here had rotted away, but you see it's moist. The moisture's from the lettuce. I don't wet the horse manure. The horse manure is dry and composted. So I'm going to show you how I just start a bed I have some worms there, but here's where all the worms are. Basically, I'm doing 2 parts horse manure. I'm going to take the time to spread it out. I'm going to leave a separation in between the stuff that is done. This all is pretty much done and drying out. Underneath the silver one, or underneath the stainless steel tub right there, it's still got some more going to be done. But the rest of this is pretty well done. I'll be able to start harvesting this in the next couple of weeks. But in the meantime, I want to start a good bed so to get the worms to come over here. But I have found it is better not to get it too thick. If I get it more than 6 inches thick, it can be a foot deep and it's still not have a very, the bottom, the worms feed more toward the top than the bottom. So they do not get to the bottom. And the bottom just soaks up all the juices. Which is still good and I've used it in several different ways. If I need it, I can use it, but I'd rather get a good, healthy bunch because I regulate what I put in each pot for planting purposes. Of course, horse manure isn't that good for a fertilizer, but we have both goats and rabbits, so I saved the poop from both. We forage our animals, so there also is a lot of food byproducts that they has fallen into their poop. I strained out the big pieces, but there's still a lot of hair in this actually because the goats are shedding and rabbits are shedding. So again, you can put a lot in, the worms will eat a lot. But what I do not put in here is anything. I do not feed the rabbits, or I don't use something where there is a lot of seed like tomatoes or peppers or anything like that, or something real seedy. I don't want weeds growing up in my in all my pots or around my plants in my garden when I plant them. I do use compost and I do get tomatoes or peppers popping up here and there. But this is my fertilizer and it goes in every pot, so I don't use anything with seed. I still can use, they will eat melons and citrus. They'll eat quite a bit of different stuff on the worms. They love avocados. So if you have a bunch of rotten avocados, you can feed them to your worms. They'll even eat the seeds when they rot. They even eat that. It's kind of neat. I showed my wife the other day an avocado. It was hollow, but it was full of worms. They had even eaten, I broke it apart. They had entered in through a crack in it, and it was one big glob of worms. There was no avocado yet.